Is it true? Could it be real? Boots are gone. Rejoice. You no longer have to fill up your build with a big stinky item every single time, no matter what role, no matter what game mode. Boots are finally gone. But what does that mean for Smite as a whole? Given that I think it's going to be one of the biggest meta changes we've ever seen, I thought it'd be worth a 5-minute chat just to talk through what I think we're going to see. How it works is basically over the first 8 levels, I think it is, you get movement speed as you level up. So it basically replaces boots. You don't get movement speed all in one big chunk. It's over the course of a few levels to stop you, I don't know, let's say you got all your movement speed level 5 and suddenly you were just like juiced up when you hit that. So what does it mean to no longer have to buy boots? Well, the most obvious bit of analysis is that every build is now basically roughly 1600 gold cheaper. Boots were typically a first or second item, and it was the kind of foundation item you got before you really moved on to your other high damage items. And now they're gone. So basically every build is now 1600 gold closer to full completion. It also means that given that you don't have to use a slot on boots, and even though we had the speed potion to replace boots sort of moving further on, that took ages to get online because you had to sell your item, buy another one, and buy a 1500 gold pot. So it was basically only sort of 35-minute plus that you'd see that. So what that means is that you now have another item slot. So those builds where you find, this is almost coming together, I'm just like 1 or 2 items short, those might be working now, but more on that later. So what are we going to see? Well, think about all of those builds that have been described as too slow over the years. I'm thinking items like Warlock Sash, like Book of Thoth. I think those are back in a big way because the problem with them was never their stats. They have good stats for their cost, but the problem was that, by the time you've bought boots, you then have to buy Book of Thoth, and then you have to stack it 75 times, and by that time, the person you're against has Spear of Deso and is destroying you while you're just slowly building up your magic power. But you can effectively start, Book 2 now, get Book online within like 5 minutes, be fully stacked and with a Spear of Deso by 10, and suddenly, bam, you are online as a mage. And I think across the board, these slow items that, you couldn't really afford to fit into the build or you'll fall too far behind, are now going to be back, and they're a nice base of stats to get early on. Even with something like a Warlock stuff that we haven't seen forever in the Pro League, I think we might see a bit of. Remember, it gives percent pen now. That's pretty good. And on that note, builds that require you to have a lot of items are now going to come online a lot quicker. You basically just cut out one whole step of the plan. So it means that if you're building a build like, for example, Crit, which really needs to have certain items online, you basically have a few checkpoints you need to hit. You need your item that gave you base crit chance, like maybe your rage. You need your item that gave you your attack speed and your pen, like Wind Demon, and then the juice coming through in the Deathbringer. You need to hit these steps, and that's not including attack speed, pen, lifesteal. All of those are now just one step closer because you don't have to faff about with boots, and that means that they're going to be coming online even sooner. More on why I think that's a terrifying prospect in a bit, but that's the general basis of the discussion around this, is that everything is just happening a bit sooner than it was before. So who are the winners and the losers out of this trade? Well, the winners are definitely the offensive gods. No, I'm not talking about Loki, I mean attacking gods. Gods that want to build damage and kill you. Because boots gave very few crucial offensive stats. I mean, they gave power, or maybe they give attack speed, but in these builds, if you're looking at what assassins or what hunters are building, there's certain stats they need to hit, like, penetration, like crit and stuff like this. And boots just gave power. But now you're going to be getting things like flat pen online really, really early. And flat pen early on in the game is crushing. Rather than having an item that just gives power, you're now hitting these really important other stats super duper early. And that makes you really, really strong. Like, imagine you're level 5 and, you just maybe finished your Book of Thoth and you've got a Raven dunking on you with a full crusher. He is going to one-shot you, and all assassins basically are at that level. So that is really scary. So the items that really define these builds are going to be picked up a lot sooner. I think that's going to enable a lot of builds a lot quicker. And it also means, as I alluded to earlier, the characters that need certain items to really finish their build, like I'm talking particularly about hunters here, who need to hit certain items to get their build online, and if it's got some sort of theme like crit or like, attack speed and chin size, they are going to be popping off way, way earlier. And think about it in terms of stuff like the Transcendence build, right? The 2 builds you've typically seen through hunters have been stuff like Devo gloves into boots into like executioner and wherever you want to go from there, or Transcendence into boots into Assy to catch up with that lifesteal. And the problem with the trans build has always been that you start, and don't get me wrong, you get this big power spike, lots of mana, but the other hunter starts with Devos, and from their first item, they've got lifesteal. And so they are able to box you and heal back straight away. Whereas you have to build a Transcendence, and then Boots, and then Assy. And by the time you finish that, you're 3 items in, and only then can you really fight them, which is why we didn't see Trans builds particularly take off for a long time. But now Trans has been buffed, and it's basically the most gold efficient item in the game, maybe ever. Like, so much power, so cheap. What the fuck? Anyway, that's besides the point. The point is that now you'll have a Trans build where you go Trans and then straight into Assy. And so the time between being able to fight has just dropped like massively. And it means that within those 2 items, rather than you having your Boots and Trans where it was like you have power and you have a bit of attack speed, you now have within 2 items a shitload of power, attack speed, pen, lifesteal. That's 2 items in. You can do that in about 8 minutes of the game time. And basically your build is kind of set from there. Like, you've got your core level of stats online. You've got all of the little things you need to hit before you can really start building the juicy items. You've done that within like 8 minutes. That's really scary because it basically, you know, that if you think about it in terms of a curve, right? The curve was always supposed to be for hunters flat early at the beginning. As you build weak items, you stack them up, and then you hit the juiced up items and you ramp up into the late game powerhouse we know. But now it's kind of like whoop instead. I'll do it over here. It's more like, rather than whoop, it's like eerie. I think those sound effects tell you all you need to know. They've basically just, yeah, no Boots is a dream for hunters, basically. And so who are the losers here? The main losers to me are supports, or generally weaker tanks, low income characters, because Boots were always one of the most stat-efficient items for their cost in the entire game. That's always been their thing. They've been consistently cheapened over the years because, you know, Hirez recognized you need to be building it every game. You don't want to have to build something really expensive every single game. So they're really cheap, and they provide really good stats for the cost. I mean, everyone's been talking about tank Boots recently because they are busted. So for a character that has a low amount of gold compared to, you know, the junglers or the mids, whatever, the solo laners, they were a really good crutch, a really good bridge item to, you know, really keep that build online and to keep yourself alive compared to the other people who were getting their Transcendence at like level 5. So this change effectively takes away one of the most efficient bits of a support's kit. And for solo laners as well. I don't think solo laners will struggle as much because they're still getting a lot of gold. They can afford to go into other different items very early on. But especially for tanks who are really low on gold at any given time. I mean, they've got a lot more gold at the moment, you know, like Benevolence, Watchers, blah, blah, blah. But still, I think compared to everyone else, they're going to be really behind in gold and struggling a bit. So they're going to lose one of the most efficient bits of their kit. And I think that's something that Hirez need to look at in terms of making sure that there's a tank item that supports and get online quite quickly and make them tanky. I mean, being able to get Thieves online really quickly will be nice. And it's not like they're going to be totally lost, but then you compare it to, you know, the Thanatos that has a Crusher at 3 minutes into the game. You're like, heavy breathing. So my next section I'm going to talk about is my worries about this. And I want to preface this by saying I think this is a really positive change. I've been pushing the no boots for years and years and years because it just does not make sense to me that there is just this item that it's generally accepted that everyone must build every single game all the time, no matter what role, no matter what game mode. Because you only got 6 item slots, right? So why take up one every single game? So I think this is a really positive change. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. You're going to see a lot more viable builds. But with that being said, I think there's a lot of balance work to be done before we get there. So my worry with how this general change is looking is that the time to kill in Smite is already, before this boots change, way too high. I think this is a real problem we've seen this season where the gold creep on the map has been insane. There is so much farm on the map. You're getting so much gold from the lane, from the camps. You've got stuff like Benevolence adding to the gold now, Gilded Arrow. There is so much gold in the game, and I don't think that's a bad thing, right? To get builds online, because it's really interesting when you get, like, the items are what makes Smite fun, in my opinion. Well, part of, anyway. And, like, I think you can see this gold creep really clearly in terms of crit builds, because crit builds have been around forever, and they've always been strong if you could get them online, but why have they been really strong this season? Basically 2 reasons. You know, the first one is Wind Demon, because crit builds always struggle to get enough attack speed and pen in them, and Wind Demon solved that by itself. But the other main problem that I've always said is that there's just so much more gold at the moment. And it's not just because of Gilded Arrow. Gilded Arrow just adds to this. And it means that, you know, back in the day when you were building a crit build, yes, it'd be really strong late, but if you wanted to buy a Deathbringer, you were talking sort of 35 minutes to finish that thing because it was expensive and you had like no gold. And it balanced out the crit build because it meant, okay, you're going to be really strong late, but you have to earn it to get there. Whereas now you could get crit build online within like 20 minutes, like with Deathbringer and everything. And that just made it really scary because other people were still building, you know, you won. This wasn't like the late game, you were there at the final destination thing. This was like still in the kind of formative stages of the game. So I think that was a really scary thing for crit builds. They were just online so quickly and able to get their value over so much a longer period. And I think this change is only going to enhance that. It's only going to make it worse because, you know, if there was enough gold creep in the game already, there's now 1,600 gold less that you have to earn. So it's like, you are just basically 1,600 gold richer. And that's insane because you already had so much gold as is. It basically means that the items come online super quickly. You get really important stats very, very early. And I don't think it really tracks with your levels and your HP. And I think people are just dying like this at the moment. Like from the PTS footage I've seen, basically after 5 minutes, it's a bloodbath. Everyone gets an item online and starts swinging for the houses. And that's really scary. I think in the SBL, we're going to see it when the characters get their first back, get their first item finished with a strong starter item. It's going to be absolute chaos. It's going to be death reigning supreme everywhere. Solo kills out of the wazoo. It's going to be a mess. So I think the time to kill has been a real problem for a while, and this is only going to exacerbate that problem. And the other side of that coin is that late game builds are now also going to come online so much quicker. So like I said about these crit builds where they were already coming online a bit too quickly, for my opinion, well, they're now going to come online even quicker. People aren't even really building crit builds the same way anymore. They've now just got trans in there as well. Like, these late game builds are even faster, and that's scary because they are really strong, and they should be balanced by the fact that you're only able to get them late on in the game, but you don't have to anymore. You can have them within 20 minutes, even quicker than you could before. And so I think it means that once again, supports are going to struggle even more because the damage is just so high. So like I said, I think this is a really positive change, but I think Hirez need to recognize that there is just so much damage in the game at the moment that it's insane. You know, there's just like, there's a reason why tanks have been building beads so much, is because you can't afford to be still in a fight for like even a second, because there's just so much damage in the game that if you stand still for like a blink of an eye within, you know, the first 15 minutes, you just get blown up because there is so much damage so early, and now we've brought it even earlier. Okay, so those are what I think the problems are, but how do we fix this? I think the first step is it's one of these two solutions. It's basically gold needs to be fixed. We need to have items be a bit more expensive, or the gold spooling on the map decrease, because there is so much farm on the map. Like, just look at the duo lane at the moment. You've got, on the way to the duo lane from the base, you've got the back camps, you've got this new Draugr camp, whatever it's called, red buff, purple buff, 2 harpies, and another little camp at the side, compared to last season where it was like you had your purple buff and your little side camp thingy, and that was it. So that's just duo lane as an example. It's the same all over the map. There's just so many camps, so much farm. I think it's interesting to have a map like that where there's stuff going on, but I think it means that there is just so much gold. And if Snowball was a bit of a problem earlier in the year, this is only going to make it worse. And so I think we want to see either a bit of a reduction in the gold generally given across the board, or instead a big hike in item prices, because I think some builds just come online way too quickly. I just want you to imagine you're playing against a Thanatos and you've just you finish your Book of Filth, you're feeling good, and you get dunked and one-shot by, you know, Jotuns, Brawlers, Hydras, Crusher, some ridiculous item that he's got within 5 minutes, and then he goes and steals all your 8 billion camps, and then now he's got like 3 items online, and you're just desperately trying to stack your little item. I just think that the amount of damage and power you get online so quickly, it spooks me. I'm officially shooketh. So I think if I was Hirez right now, I'd be looking at trying to decrease some sort of gold gain, whether it be through lowering the amount given by camps or hiking up the prices of the items. And I think this is a fairly reasonable thing to say because, you know, if you're taking out boots, people no longer have to spend 1,600 gold on them, on basically, like, it wasn't really a crucial part of the build, it was just something you kind of had to do. So surely you want to reflect a kind of a general kind of almost £2,000, 2,000 gold cost across the rest of the build, right? You know, maybe just like a 10% increase on all prices or something like that. I don't know. That's what I would do if I was in charge of Hirez. But I'm not. So I'm intrigued to hear what you have to say, because you guys have all got enormous brains, and I know that because you're subbed to this channel, so that makes you very smart. So yeah, what do you guys think? I think we are really going to see a big difference in the way stuff is played, because, you know, everyone's juiced up from from level 1 now, basically. So I think we're going to see a very, very different style of play and a very different landscape in the SPL. So yeah, there's my quick little rant. Thanks for watching. No more to be said. Sorry I look like shit, I just got out of bed, but this is what I do for you. Just come straight on, throw my opinions into a microphone. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.